Hey guys, tonight we drop you straight into a world where the sky has teeth and the calendar says it's the 18th century, but the weather clearly didn't read the memo. You're standing there in the present tense, breath already fogging when the first flakes drift down like innocent little lies. The light dims, the horizon softens, and within minutes the air thickens until it feels chewable. This is what surviving an 18th century blizzard felt like, and you're about to learn, very personally. That snow back then didn't come with weather apps, emergency alerts, or a cozy stay indoors notification. You probably won't survive this, statistically speaking, which is comforting in a dark, bedtime story sort of way. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. While you're at it, drop your location and local time in the comments. Somewhere out there, someone else is listening to this while it's snowing right now, and that's delightfully ominous. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're outside when it begins, because of course you are. 18th century life doesn't really do indoors all day. You might be on a road, a field, or a half-remembered track between villages, and at first the snow feels manageable, romantic even. Big flakes, slow descent, the kind of scene painters will later exaggerate. Then the wind arrives like it's late and angry about it. One moment you can see the tree line, the next it's gone, erased as if someone shook an Etch-A sketch the size of the world. This sudden onset is historically accurate, by the way. Mainstream accounts from the 1700s describe blizzards arriving with terrifying speed, especially during the colder decades of the so-called Little Ice Age, when Europe and North America experienced harsher winters overall. The sound changes first. Wind roars in your ears, drowning out everything else, and snow begins to hiss as it skims sideways across frozen ground. You pull your coat tighter, which is adorable because the coat doesn't care. It's wool, yes, hand-woven, heavy, and theoretically warm. But once the snow melts into it and refreezes, it becomes less garment and more wearable regret. People in the 18th century knew cold, but that didn't make it polite. Historians still argue whether communities of the time truly understood hypothermia as a distinct condition, or whether they simply lumped it under vague phrases like "taken by the cold," which feels medically unhelpful but poetically final. Visibility collapses to a few feet. This is the whiteout, a term you won't hear yet because meteorology hasn't gotten around to naming everything, but the experience is unmistakable. The ground and sky blend into one glowing nothing and you lose the sense of up and down. You blink, and the snow fills your eyelashes, freezing them together just long enough to be irritating and slightly insulting. You laugh once, a short puff of sound ripped away by the wind. Joke number one for the night. Congratulations, you've discovered nature's most aggressive exfoliation routine. Your sense of direction evaporates fast. Roads in the 1700s are often little more than ruts in memory, and now they're buried. There are no reflective signs, no mile markers, no comforting GPS voice calmly rerouting you. You turn in a slow circle, trying to match the land to what you remember, but everything looks the same. White, moving, loud. A mainstream historical fact slides in here quietly. Many recorded deaths during great blizzards of the 18th century happened within a short distance of safety, sometimes mere yards from a house or barn the victim simply couldn't see. Sleep well with that thought. Snow piles up faster than you expect, especially with the wind sculpting it into drifts that rise to your knees, then your thighs. Each step becomes work. Your boots, leather, stiff, and not remotely waterproof, fill with slush that numbs your toes into distant concepts rather than body parts. Somewhere in your mind, a practical voice suggests finding shelter immediately, but another voice insists you should just push on a little farther, because surely the storm can't last. This internal argument is timeless and deeply human. Historians still argue whether stubbornness or optimism was the more lethal trait in historical winter disasters, and honestly, it's probably a group project. There's a quirky tidbit worth whispering here. In some rural 18th century communities, People believed sudden blizzards were preceded by an unnatural silence in animals, as if birds and livestock sensed the storm and went quiet in warning. Whether that's folklore or selective memory is up for debate, but you do notice something eerie. No birds, no insects, just wind and your own breathing. If the world had a mute button, someone just sat on it. Snow stings your face now, tiny impacts that add up. You turn your head away instinctively, tucking your chin, and your scarf freezes slightly where your breath hits it. Another light joke, because we need 3 per 1,000 words and also because coping mechanisms are important. At least you don't have to worry about your hair getting ruined. Frost is a bold new styling product. Time becomes strange almost immediately. Without visual markers, minutes feel longer, stretched thin like taffy pulled too far. The cold doesn't feel dramatic yet. It's not pain exactly, but it's invasive, a slow negotiation where warmth leaks out and doesn't come back. You flex your fingers inside your gloves just to reassure yourself they still exist. People of the 18th century often wore mittens rather than gloves for warmth, a small design choice that mattered a lot on nights like this, though right now you trade a philosophical essay for a decent pair of modern ski gloves. As the blizzard fully claims the landscape, one truth settles in. Arrival is the most dangerous moment. The shock, the sudden loss of reference, the need to decide fast. There's no dramatic music cue, no narrator clearing their throat to announce Act 1. It's just you, the wind, and the realization that the storm doesn't care who you are or how prepared you thought you were. And as you brace yourself, shoulders hunched, snow pressing in from every direction, the night stretches ahead, long and indifferent, waiting to see what you'll do next. The cold doesn't announce itself all at once. It negotiates. It starts by slipping through the tiny gaps you didn't know existed, the places where wool meets wrist, where scarf meets neck, where your coat's wooden buttons leave honest little drafts. You're dressed exactly as an 18th century person would expect to be dressed for winter. Layers of wool, maybe a linen shirt underneath, a waistcoat, heavy breeches, stockings pulled high. On paper, this is sensible. In practice, the wind treats fabric like a suggestion. You feel it first along your spine, a thin blade of chill tracing downward as if the storm is reading you like a map. Wool is warm when dry, famously so, but snow doesn't stay snow. It melts against your body heat, soaks in, then the wind flash freezes it, and suddenly your coat is less insulation and more enthusiastic heat sink. Mainstream historical facts sliding in quietly here. Period accounts from the 1700s often mention people found frozen stiff as boards, a phrase that reflects how thoroughly clothing could ice over, locking bodies into position. Fashion statement, not the one you were going for. Your hands are next. You clench them into fists inside your mittens, or gloves if you're unlucky, and flex them repeatedly, trying to keep blood moving. The leather stiffens, creaking faintly. Fingers go from cold to numb so gradually, you almost miss the transition. This is the danger zone, though you don't know the term yet. Frostbite as a concept exists only loosely. People know flesh can die from cold, but the neat stages and warnings aren't common knowledge. Historians still argue whether widespread understanding of frostbite symptoms lagged because numbness feels deceptively harmless, like your body is politely not complaining. The wind pushes harder, finding rhythm, gusting in waves that rock you slightly on your feet. Each blast forces air through your clothes, flushing out warmth you've been carefully hoarding. You hunch your shoulders, instinctively making yourself smaller like that's going to help. Joke number 1, soft and dry. Congratulations, you've invented the 18th century shrug of despair. It doesn't help, but it feels proactive. Your face is fully exposed now, skin tightening, cheeks prickling, nose burning in a way that's almost sharp enough to feel alive. You pull your scarf higher, covering your mouth, and immediately regret it as moisture from your breath condenses and freezes, turning the fabric into a crunchy, icy mask. Every inhale rasps. Every exhale ghosts white into the storm and vanishes instantly. People in this era sometimes rubbed snow on exposed skin, believing it prevented frost damage. That's the quirky tidbit for this stretch of the night. The idea was that snow toughened the flesh. Modern you knows better, but modern you also isn't here, so all opinions are theoretical. Your legs ache as you push through drifts, thighs burning from effort while your knees complain about the cold in a dull, arthritic whisper. Breeches and stockings were never designed for sideways ice pellets. Each step sends a shiver up your bones, a vibration that rattles your teeth just enough to be annoying. You try to keep a steady pace because stopping feels dangerous, but so does pushing too hard. This balancing act, exertion versus exhaustion, is one people have been failing since the first winter someone said, "It'll be fine." The fabric against your skin becomes increasingly noticeable. Linen underneath your wool shirt, once soft, now feels clammy and unforgiving. Moisture trapped between layers steals heat faster than the wind alone. There's a mainstream historical detail that lands here with a thud. Many 18th century laborers owned only one winter outfit. No spare clothes. No dry change waiting somewhere warm. If what you're wearing gets wet, that's the state of things until spring or death, whichever shows up first. You check yourself constantly, a quiet inventory. Fingers still there. Toes present though sulking. Jaw tight but working. You force yourself to wiggle toes inside boots that feel 2 sizes too small thanks to swelling and ice. The leather creaks again, and for a moment you imagine it cracking, splitting open to let the cold rush in properly. You mutter something under your breath that might be a prayer or might just be complaining. Hard to tell anymore. The wind shifts slightly, changing angle, and it's amazing how that alone can feel like a personal attack. One side of your body takes the brunt now, shoulder and hip numbing faster, throwing off your balance. You lean into it, adopting a diagonal posture that would look ridiculous in any other context. Joke number 2, because we need the levity. If anyone sketches you right now, art historians will later describe it as a study in regret and bad decisions. There's a folk belief floating around this period that cold enters the body through the feet first, then climbs upward like a living thing. Standing here, you're inclined to agree. Your toes feel distant, like someone else's problem, and that creeping numbness inches upward with each minute. You stomp harder than necessary, not caring about grace. The goal is circulation, not elegance. Breathing hurts now, not sharply, but with a dry, scraping sensation deep in your chest. The air is so cold it feels thin, though that's illusion. Still, your lungs protest and you slow your breaths, trying to calm yourself. Panic wastes heat. And even without modern physiology, people knew fear made things worse. Historians still argue whether experienced travelers truly managed emotions better in crises, or whether the record simply favored survivors who got lucky and later sounded confident about it. Your ears throb, then fade into numbness, the kind that feels like pressure without pain. You tug your hat lower, pulling it down over them, and feel a brief rush of relief that quickly dulls. Every small adjustment is a gamble now. Uncover skin to fix one problem, risk creating another. This is the quiet cruelty of cold. It turns basic self-care into a series of loaded choices. Somewhere beneath all this, a stubborn ember of warmth still exists, generated by movement and will. You guard it fiercely. You keep going because stopping would let the cold settle in properly, and you're not ready for that conversation yet. The storm howls on, unimpressed by your layered strategy, but you're still upright, still moving, still very much here. For now, that's enough. You reach the point where forward motion stops feeling brave and starts feeling stupid, and that's usually when shelter becomes the most beautiful word you know. The blizzard hasn't softened. If anything, it's settled into a confident rhythm, like it knows it's going to be here a while. Snow stacks up against your shins, then your knees, and the wind leans on you hard enough that you have to widen your stance just to stay upright. You scan the white blur ahead for anything, darkness, shape, a break in the wind that might mean refuge. In the 18th century, shelter is rarely ideal, it's just less terrible than the alternative. You think through the options the way people before you did, fast and imperfect. A farmhouse would be perfect, but farms are spaced far apart and you can't see 10 feet. A barn might do, drafty, full of animals, but animals mean body heat. Mainstream historical facts slipping in quietly. Many documented winter survivors in this era owed their lives to barns, stables, or sheds, especially those housing cattle, whose collective warmth could raise temperatures noticeably in enclosed spaces. You stumble onward, eyes narrowed against the wind, when a darker smudge appears to your left. At first you think it's a trick of light, but it holds steady as you approach. A fence line, half buried, posts sticking up like broken teeth. Fences mean people, and people mean structures, which is about as close to hope as you get tonight. You follow it with gloved hands, fingers brushing rough wood glazed with ice. It leads you a short distance before vanishing under a drift, but just beyond it you see the slanted outline of a building. It's small, low, possibly a shed, possibly a barn, possibly something built with more optimism than skill. The door is half buried, snow piled against it like the storm is trying to keep you out specifically. You lean into it with your shoulder, pushing, slipping, swearing under your breath. The door resists, then creaks open just enough for you to squeeze inside, and the wind's roar drops instantly to a muffled, distant sound. That silence feels unreal, like stepping underwater. Inside, it's dark and smells like hay, wood, and old animal. Your eyes take a moment to adjust, and when they do, you see the vague shapes of stalls and blessedly movement. Cows, a few of them. They shift and snort softly, unimpressed by your dramatic entrance. Joke number one, because even now, congratulations, you've found roommates who will absolutely judge you but also accidentally save your life. The temperature inside is still cold, but it's a different cold. Still air, no wind. You can breathe without pain now. You close the door as best you can, packing snow against the gap at the bottom with your boot, a crude but effective seal. This kind of improvisation was common. People used whatever they had to block drafts, including rags, straw, even their own spare clothing. Historians still argue whether these quick fixes significantly improved survival rates, or whether they mostly provided psychological comfort that encouraged people to rest rather than panic wander back into storms. You lean against the wall, legs shaking, and force yourself not to sit immediately. Sitting feels tempting, but you know somehow that you need to keep moving a little longer. You stomp your feet, roll your shoulders, shake out your arms. The cows watch you with slow blinks, steam rising from their bodies in the dim light. Their presence is grounding. Warmth radiates off them in a way that feels almost magical, like you've stumbled into a low-budget miracle. There's a quirky tidbit tucked into this moment. In some regions, people believe that sleeping near animals during storms transferred vitality, not just heat. It wasn't just practical. It was almost spiritual, a sense that shared survival-bound species together. Standing here, numbed and grateful, you're willing to believe a cow could have healing powers if it means you get through the night. You finally crouch, then sit, back against the wall, knees pulled up. The floor is hard-packed earth, cold seeping up immediately, but you pull hay toward you, piling it beneath and around your legs. Hay scratches, pokes, and smells faintly sweet, and you've never loved anything more. Another mainstream fact slides in. Bedding animals and people with straw or hay was a primary insulation method before widespread flooring and heating, especially in rural buildings. Your fingers are clumsy as you adjust your clothes, loosening layers slightly to vent moisture without exposing skin. This is delicate work. Sweat is dangerous now, but so is freezing in wet fabric. You fumble a button and drop it, hear it ping softly against the floor, then disappear into the hay. You consider searching for it, then decide you don't care. Buttons are tomorrow problems. The storm continues outside, wind rattling the walls, snow thudding against the roof. You imagine drifts climbing higher, reshaping the world while you sit in this small pocket of survival. Time slows again, but differently now. Not stretched by fear, but softened by relative safety. You're still cold, but not being actively attacked by the weather, and that feels luxurious. Your muscles start to ache as adrenaline fades. Shivers come in waves, teeth chattering despite your best efforts to control it. You hug yourself, tucking your hands into your armpits, stealing warmth the old-fashioned way. Joke number two, gentle and tired. You've reinvented the human burrito, filling included. You listen to the cows chew, to the soft shift of their weight. One stamps a hoof, sending a dull vibration through the floor. It's oddly soothing, like a metronome marking time. People in the 18th century often slept in multi-use spaces like this, especially during emergencies, and the sounds of animals were familiar background noise rather than novelty. Historians still argue whether this closeness to livestock improved resilience to harsh conditions, or simply normalized discomfort so thoroughly that people didn't expect better. As minutes pass, your body temperature stabilizes slightly. The numbness in your fingers retreats enough that you can feel pain again, which is uncomfortable but reassuring. Pain means sensation. Sensation means circulation. You flex your hands slowly, wincing, then sigh in relief when they respond. The temptation to sleep creeps in, heavy and seductive. Your eyes droop. The hay looks inviting. You tell yourself you'll just rest them for a moment. Somewhere a half-remembered warning surfaces about cold and sleep and not letting yourself drift, but it's fuzzy, unstructured. You shake your head, forcing your eyes open, knowing you need to stay alert a bit longer. Joke number 3, because we're committed to the bit. You've survived a blizzard so far only to be defeated by cozy hay and warm cows, which would be an embarrassing epitaph. For now, though, you're sheltered. The storm hasn't won yet. You're inside, breathing steadily, listening to life around you continue despite the weather's tantrum. The night is far from over, but this scramble for shelter has bought you time. And in an 18th century blizzard, time is the rarest luxury of all. The barn keeps the wind off. The cows lend you warmth, but cold is still very much in the room, tapping its fingers and waiting. Shelter alone isn't enough. You know this in your bones, and your bones are currently negotiating their resignation. What you desperately want is fire, not the poetic kind, the real kind, flickering, smoky, stubborn fire that turns breath into steam for a different reason. There are no matches in your pocket, no lighter with a satisfying click. This is the 18th century, and fire is a skill, not a convenience. You push yourself back to standing, legs stiff, and start looking around by touch and memory. Barns often have flint and steel somewhere, used for lanterns, pipes, or just in case, because people then understood that fire was not optional. Mainstream historical fact settling in here. Flint and steel fire making was the dominant method in Europe and much of North America until friction matches appeared in the 19th century, and most households owned at least one set. Your fingers fumble along a shelf, brushing dust, wood splinters, something sticky you choose not to identify. Then metal, cold, curved, a striker. Nearby, wrapped in a scrap of cloth, you find flint and a bit of char cloth, blackened fabric specifically prepared to catch sparks. The relief you feel is out of proportion but entirely justified. This is not guaranteed survival, but it's a fighting chance. You crouch near the wall, out of the worst drafts, and arrange your little fire-making altar on the ground. Hay is everywhere, which is both helpful and terrifying. Fire inside a barn is historically a very bad idea, but freezing to death is worse, so you're threading a needle here. People did light small, controlled fires in outbuildings during storms, often in improvised hearths or braziers. Historians still argue whether this practice saved more lives than it cost, since accidental fires were also a major cause of winter deaths. Comforting ambiguity that. You strike the steel against the flint. Nothing. Again. A tiny spark jumps, misses the cloth. You swear quietly. Your hands are slow, coordination dulled by cold and fatigue. You adjust, bring the cloth closer, strike again. A spark lands, glows faintly, then dies. The process is maddeningly delicate. Modern, you would already be lighting a candle and complaining about the aesthetic. 18th century, you has to earn warmth one spark at a time. Your breath fogs the space and you lean closer, shielding the setup with your body. Strike. Spark. This one catches. A small orange glow blooms in the cloth, fragile as a firefly. You freeze, afraid to breathe too hard. Slowly, carefully, you fold the cloth into a nest of hay and dry splinters, coaxing it like it's shy. You blow gently, feel warmth kiss your fingers, and then there it is. Flame. Joke number 1, whispered in triumph. You have successfully unlocked humanity's oldest downloadable content. Fire. The flame is small, unimpressive, but it's alive. You feed it slivers of wood, then slightly larger pieces, building it into a modest fire contained within a shallow pit you scrape into the dirt. Smoke curls upward, stinging your eyes, carrying the smell of burning hay and old wood. The cows shift uneasily, snorting, but they don't panic. Animals are familiar with fire. They've lived alongside it as long as people have. Heat spreads outward in a tight circle. You extend your hands, palms open, feeling sensation return with sharp little stabs. It hurts. That's good. Pain means blood moving, nerves waking up. You grit your teeth and let it happen. People in this era often warmed frost-numbed limbs too quickly, causing damage, but you don't know that yet. You only know that cold is losing ground. There's a quirky tidbit tucked into this moment. Some 18th-century manuals warned against swearing while making fire, claiming foul language offended the spirit of flame and made ignition harder. Standing here, you suspect the spirit of flame just enjoys watching people struggle, regardless of vocabulary. The fire changes the sound of the space. Crackles join the cows breathing, a soft, steady rhythm. Shadows jump on the walls, making the barn feel larger than smaller, then alive in an unsettling way. You shrug off your outer coat and hold it near the heat, careful not to scorch it. Steam rises as moisture evaporates, and the smell of wet wool fills the air. It's not pleasant, but it's progress. You rotate slowly, warming front, then back, then sides like a very tired rotisserie chicken. Joke number 2, because the mental image demands it. All that's missing is seasoning and a price tag. As your core temperature creeps upward, exhaustion hits harder. Fire has that effect. It relaxes you, tells your body it's okay to stand down. You fight the urge to slump fully, to let the warmth pull you under. You've heard stories, half-remembered warnings about people falling asleep by fires and not waking up, though whether that's from smoke, cold, or something else is unclear. Historians still argue how much of the don't sleep advice around cold exposure was based on observation versus folklore designed to keep people moving. You poke the fire, adjusting it to burn steadily rather than flare. Fuel management matters now. You don't want a blaze, you want longevity. Small pieces, spaced carefully. You glance at the door, at the snow piled against it, and wonder how long the storm will last. Hours, all night, days. Without clocks or forecasts, time becomes a guess shaped by hope. Your hands regain enough dexterity to rub together properly. Feeling creeps back into your toes, accompanied by a deep, aching throb that makes you wince. You press your boots closer to the fire, careful again. Leather shrinks if overheated, another fun problem for later. 18th century footwear was often custom fitted and expensive relative to income. Ruining boots could be a serious blow. Right now, though, future economics can wait. You notice your breathing evening out, no longer shallow and frantic. The tight band around your chest loosens. This is the turning point, the moment where survival feels possible rather than theoretical. Fire changes psychology as much as temperature. It gives you something to tend, a task, a focus. In a world stripped to basics, purpose is warmth. Outside, the storm still rages, but it feels farther away now, like a problem happening to someone else. Snow continues to hit the roof, but you're insulated by wood, hay, and flame. You feed the fire again, then sit back, watching it work. The cows settle, resuming their quiet chewing, apparently satisfied that you haven't burned the place down yet. Joke number 3, soft and sleepy. You and the cows have formed a very exclusive winter survival club. Membership benefits include warmth and judgmental staring. As minutes stretch into an hour, you maintain the fire, adding fuel sparingly. You dry your gloves, then your socks, rotating them carefully. Each small success stacks, building momentum. You're still in danger, still cold, still one bad decision from disaster. But now you have light, heat, and the sense that you're not entirely at the storm's mercy. The flame flickers steadily, casting its modest glow, and you sit with it, guarding it like a secret. In the 18th century, fire was never just background. It was labor, skill, and hope all rolled into one. Tonight, it's your lifeline, and you treat it with the reverence it deserves, knowing the night still has plenty left to ask of you. Warmth buys you clarity, and clarity immediately reminds you that warmth alone doesn't feed you. As the fire settles into a steady, obedient burn, your stomach makes itself known with a low, hollow complaint, the kind that feels more serious than hunger usually does. This isn't boredom eating hunger. This is calorie math. Cold turns your body into a furnace that demands fuel, and right now it's burning through reserves you didn't know you had. You pat your pockets and bag, inventorying supplies by feel. Hardtack? Of course it's hardtack. Dense, dry, and famously resistant to human teeth, it was a staple of the 18th century precisely because it didn't spoil. Mainstream historical fact easing in here. Hardtack, made of flour, water, and sometimes salt, could last for years if kept dry, and soldiers, sailors, and travelers relied on it heavily despite its reputation for being unpleasant. You pull out a square and examine it in the firelight, its surface pocked and cracked like it's been through things, which it has. You bite down experimentally and immediately regret it. The sound echoes in the barn, sharp and final. Your jaw protests. Joke number 1 because it's earned. Congratulations, you've discovered a food that fights back. You soften it by holding it near the fire, letting a little heat creep in, then gnaw at the edge, breaking off a piece small enough to manage. It tastes like nothing in particular, flour memory perhaps, but as you chew, you feel energy begin to trickle in. Not fast, not dramatically, but enough to matter. You wash it down with a careful sip from your canteen. The water is cold enough to hurt your teeth, but it's still liquid, which feels like a minor miracle. People in the 18th century often melted snow for water during storms, though that required fuel and patience. Historians still argue whether melting snow directly was common practice or discouraged due to beliefs that it chilled the blood, a phrase that managed to be both poetic and unhelpfully vague. As you eat, you ration mentally. One piece now, another later. You can't afford to eat everything just because you're warm and tired. Hunger will come back, and when it does, morale will dip with it. Food in situations like this is as much psychological support as physical. Each bite is a reminder that you're planning for the future, which is a very hopeful thing to do in a blizzard. The fire crackles, steady and reassuring. You adjust it slightly, pushing embers together, coaxing heat without letting it flare. The cows shift again, one letting out a long, contented sigh that sounds suspiciously like judgment. You imagine they're thinking about how much easier this would be if you'd been born with 4 stomachs and a fur coat. Fair point. You wrap your coat tighter around your shoulders and lean back against the wall, careful to stay awake. The warmth makes your eyelids heavy, and the combination of food and relative safety is dangerously comforting. You fight it by keeping your hands busy, breaking another piece of hardtack, rearranging hay, poking the fire. People in the past understood this instinctively. Activity staves off sleep, and sleep in the cold can be a one-way door. Historians still argue whether the belief that sleep equals death in cold exposure was overstated, but enough people didn't wake up that the warning stuck. There's a quirky tidbit that drifts through your mind as you chew. Some travelers carried small amounts of sugar or honey specifically for emergencies like this, believing sweetness restored vital spirits. While the language is dated, the idea isn't wrong. Quick calories matter. You don't have honey, but you imagine it anyway, golden and absurdly luxurious, and that fantasy alone lifts your mood a notch. Your body responds gradually. Shivering slows, becoming occasional tremors rather than constant vibration. The ache in your muscles deepens, but it's the ache of use, not panic. You stretch your legs carefully, extending them toward the fire, then pulling back when the heat becomes intense. You're learning the boundaries again, reacquainting yourself with your own limits. Outside, the storm continues, but the sound has changed. The wind no longer screams. It roars steadily, like an engine running in the distance. Snow still hits the walls, but less violently. This might mean the worst has passed, or it might just be the eye of the beast catching its breath. Without instruments or forecasts, you're left with educated guesses and gut feelings. People in the 18th century relied heavily on sound and pressure changes to judge weather, a skill modern life has mostly erased. Historians still argue how accurate these sensory readings actually were versus how much confidence was retroactively assigned to survivors. You eat another small piece of hardtack, slower this time, savoring it as much as one can savor something that tastes like ambition. You sip water again, then cork the canteen carefully. Spills are not an option. You tuck it close to your body to keep it from freezing solid, a trick passed down through generations. Joke number 2, soft and self-aware. You're basically babysitting bread, water, and fire like they're toddlers with a death wish. Your thoughts wander as your body stabilizes. You think about home, wherever that is in this version of your life. about people who might be waiting or might not even know you're out here. Communication in the 18th century is slow, and storms like this could cut communities off entirely for days or weeks. Many blizzards became tragedies not because people were unprepared, but because help couldn't reach them in time. That's the mainstream truth beneath the romance of snow. The cows settle further, lying down, their bulk shifting hay softly. One is close enough now that you can feel heat radiating from its side. You inch nearer, careful not to startle it, and it tolerates your presence with saintly indifference. Shared warmth feels ancient, instinctive. There's comfort in not being alone, even if your companion chews cud and refuses to make eye contact. As the hour stretches on, you begin to plan. Not big plans, just the next steps. How long the fire can last with available fuel. How much food you can spare. Whether it's safer to stay here until morning or attempt movement if the storm breaks. These calculations are slow, deliberate, and grounding. Planning means you believe there will be a morning. Joke number 3, quiet and tired. You've gone from I might die to let's talk logistics, which is basically the human victory condition. You feed the fire once more, then sit back, breathing evenly. The barn feels smaller now, cozier, like a pocket carved out of chaos. Hunger is at bay for the moment. Warmth is holding. The storm still owns the world outside, but here, in this hay-scented bubble, you've bought yourself another stretch of time. And in an 18th century blizzard, that's how survival happens. Not in heroic leaps, but in small, stubborn acts repeated until dawn has no choice but to arrive. You think you know where you are. That belief settles in quietly, the way assumptions always do, and it's comforting in a dangerous sort of way. With food in your stomach and fire steady, your mind drifts back to maps, mental ones, imperfect sketches of roads, fields, streams, and landmarks you passed earlier. In the 18th century, navigation lives almost entirely inside people's heads. There are maps, yes, but most travelers rely on memory, routine, and the land itself to tell them where they stand. Now the land is hidden. You stare toward the barn door, imagining what lies beyond it. Somewhere out there is a road, you're fairly sure. A bend near an oak tree. A rise that slopes down toward a village or a river. Snow has erased all of it, smoothing the world into something unreadable. Mainstream historical fact eases in here. During severe winter storms of the 1700s, roads frequently vanished entirely under drifts, and even well-traveled routes could become deadly traps for anyone who trusted memory alone. You poke the fire, then sit back, weighing the question that every stranded traveler eventually faces: stay or go. Staying means shelter, warmth, and limited resources. Going means exposure, risk, and the possibility of reaching help. Neither option comes with instructions. Historians still argue whether people who survived historical blizzards did so because they stayed put or because they moved decisively, and frustratingly, the answer seems to be both, depending on luck. You try to read the storm by sound. The wind has softened slightly, losing its sharp edges, but it's still persistent. Snow taps the roof in a steady rhythm. This could be the storm winding down, or it could just be resting. 18th century travelers were taught to judge weather by clouds, pressure, and animal behavior. But right now the sky is invisible and the animals are cows, whose weather forecasting skills are, at best, inconsistent. There's a quirky tidbit that floats up from somewhere in your memory. Some people believe that blizzards followed rivers and valleys, guided by unseen currents. While not scientifically sound, it wasn't entirely useless. Low ground does funnel wind and snow. If you can find a stream, you might find direction. Of course, streams are also buried, frozen, and excellent places to fall into something very cold and final. You stand and stretch again, joints popping softly. Your legs feel heavy but functional. That's a good sign. You pull your coat back on, now drier and warmer, and lace your boots tighter. Preparation feels good. It gives your hands something to do and your thoughts somewhere to rest. Before you commit to anything, you open the barn door just a crack. The world outside is still white, but not violently so. Wind slides past rather than slams. Snow still falls, but the flakes are smaller, drifting rather than attacking. Visibility stretches farther than before, maybe 20 feet, maybe 30. It's not much, but compared to nothing, it feels generous. You close the door again, heart thumping. Joke number 1, dry and tired. Visibility has upgraded from inside a cloud to vague existential blur. You pace the barn, counting steps, estimating space. You look at the cows again, then at the fire. Leaving means abandoning both warmth and companionship, which feels rude and strategically unsound. Staying means betting that help will eventually come, or that you'll have enough supplies to last until the storm fully breaks. In the 18th century, rescue is never guaranteed. People can be snowed in for days, entire villages cut off. Mainstream accounts tell of travelers who waited too long and ran out of food just as the weather cleared. Historians still argue whether decision paralysis played a significant role in historical winter deaths, or whether later writers simply projected modern psychology backward. Standing here, you feel how easy it is to hesitate when every option carries risk. You check your supplies again. Hardtack, limited but not gone. Water enough for now. Fuel, hay and wood scraps though not endless. Your body tired but responsive. If you move soon while you're still warm and alert, you might reach a road or house before night deepens further. If you wait, you might be stronger later or weaker. The fire crackles, indifferent to your internal debate. One of the cows snorts, shifts, and settles again, clearly voting for you to stay and not cause trouble. You almost laugh. Joke number 2, quiet. Your survival council consists of a fire and several cows, and none of them are great conversationalists. You make a compromised decision, the kind people often make when certainty is unavailable. You'll prepare to move, but you won't rush. You'll wait a little longer, watch the storm's behavior, and if conditions continue to improve, you'll try to navigate by the few cues still available. If they worsen, you'll stay put and conserve. You reopen the door, this time stepping just outside, keeping one hand on the frame. The cold bites, but it's manageable. You look for contrast, dark shapes, lines, anything that breaks the white. Off to the right, you think you see a rise, a subtle slope. To the left, nothing but flat glare. You turn slowly, careful not to lose your sense of where the barn is. Disorientation can happen in seconds. People have walked in circles without realizing it, even in familiar fields. That's another mainstream truth drawn from grim records. You pick a landmark, a fence post barely visible, half buried, and focus on it. If you move, you'll move from marker to marker, never letting the last one vanish before you reach the next. This method, crude but effective, was taught informally for generations. Historians still argue whether it was common practice or simply common sense dressed up as tradition. After a few minutes, you retreat back inside, cheeks stinging, nose numb. You needed that information, but you don't need to lose heat yet. You shut the door, pack more snow against the gap, and sit by the fire again. Joke number 3, resigned and gentle. You went outside, didn't like it, and came back in. An entirely reasonable life philosophy. Decision made for now, you settle into watchful waiting. You keep the fire alive, ration food, and listen. The storm's voice continues to change, subtle shifts only someone sitting quietly could notice. You mark time not by clocks, but by fuel added, by hunger returning, by the slow loosening of tension in your shoulders. Navigation, you realize, isn't just about knowing where to go. It's about knowing when not to move. Tonight, survival means patience as much as direction, and you let that truth settle in as the fire burns low and steady, guarding your small island of warmth against a still, uncertain world. You notice the animals before you decide what they mean. It's subtle at first, a shift in weight, a low sound from deep in a chest, the way the cows angle their bodies slightly away from the door as if they're listening to something you can't hear yet. In the quiet pocket of the barn, every small movement feels amplified, like the world is whispering clues in a language you half remember. Animals mattered in the 18th century in ways that went beyond labor and food. People watched them closely, not just for practical reasons, but because animals were thought to sense things humans couldn't. Storms, earthquakes, illness. If the animals acted strange, it meant something was coming. Mainstream historical fact slides in here gently. Farmers and travelers routinely relied on livestock behavior to anticipate weather changes, especially before the rise of scientific forecasting, and diaries from the period often mention animals growing restless or oddly calm before severe storms. One cow lifts her head, ears flicking. Another stamps once, then stills. Their breathing changes, becoming slower, deeper, almost synchronized. It's not panic. If anything, it's settling. You find that oddly reassuring. Panic would mean danger, calm suggests endurance. You mirror them without realizing it, slowing your own movements, matching their pace. There's a quirky tidbit that surfaces from folk belief. Some communities claimed cows lying down together during a storm meant prolonged bad weather, while standing indicated it would pass quickly. This cow forecast has been mocked for centuries, but even today people swear by it. You glance around. The cows are mostly lying down now, legs tucked beneath them, bodies conserving heat. You grimace. Great. According to livestock meteorology, you're in for the long haul. Joke number 1, dry and affectionate. You didn't realize your life now depended on reading cow vibes, but here we are. You listen harder. Beyond the barn walls, the wind has changed again. Not louder, not softer, just different. Less chaotic, more directional. Snow no longer thuds randomly. It slides, whispers, skims. This matches what the animals seem to accept. The storm isn't over, but it's stabilized. That matters. Sudden shifts kill. Steady conditions, even bad ones, can be worked with. You think about other animals, the ones you can't see. Birds would have vanished hours ago, finding shelter long before the snow turned violent. Wild animals burrow, cluster, or move with the land's contours in ways people once studied carefully. Hunters in the 18th century learned to read tracks and droppings in winter to understand not just where animals went, but why. Historians still argue whether this knowledge was widespread among common people or concentrated among specialists, but everyone understood that animals were rarely foolish without reason. You edge closer to the nearest cow, careful and slow. She flicks an ear but doesn't object. Heat radiates from her flank in a steady wave. You settle near enough to benefit without crowding. Shared warmth again, but also shared listening. You imagine the vibrations traveling through her hooves into the ground, carrying information you'll never fully access. Your own body continues to send signals. Fingers tingle, toes ache, shoulders feel heavy. None of it screams danger yet, but all of it demands attention. You flex, roll, stretch gently. You've learned by now that ignoring discomfort is how it turns into crisis. The cows shift occasionally, adjusting their positions with practiced efficiency. You copy that too, changing posture before stiffness sets in. Another folk belief floats up, half remembered. Animals face away from approaching storms and toward clearing weather. You glance around. Most of the cows have oriented themselves away from the door, backs to the wind. That suggests the storm is still pressing from that direction. Not great news, but at least it's consistent. Consistency is comforting when chaos has been the default. Joke number 2, quiet and weary. You've become a full-time meteorologist with a specialty in bovine body language. There's a sound outside, faint, rhythmic, almost like footsteps. Your heart jumps before your brain catches up. Snow sliding off a roof. Wind dragging drifts along the ground. The barn creaks softly, wood flexing under cold and pressure. 18th century buildings were built to move, to flex rather than resist. That's another mainstream fact often overlooked. Rigid structures fail in storms, forgiving ones survive. You run a hand along the wall, feeling the grain, the age, the resilience baked into every beam. The cows don't react to the sound. That matters. If it were something new, something threatening, they'd notice. Their calm steadies you. You let your shoulders drop, releasing tension you didn't realize you were holding. Animals don't waste energy on false alarms. They can't afford to. You poke the fire lightly, more for reassurance than necessity. The flame responds, brightening, shadows dancing. Fire, animals, shelter, the holy trinity of winter survival. People in the 18th century built their lives around these elements, not because they were poetic, but because they worked. Historians still argue whether modern detachment from animals has dulled our instinctive environmental awareness, or whether we simply outsource it now to instruments and apps. Tonight, you trade every app on your phone for one honest cow opinion. Time drifts, not fast, not slow, just sideways. You count breaths for a while, then stop. You listen to the cadence of chewing, the occasional snort, the crackle of fire. Each sound anchors you in the present. Outside, the storm persists, but it no longer feels personal. It's just weather doing weather things. Your thoughts wander to omens beyond animals. People once read the sky the way snow fell, even the shape of drifts against buildings. Long, smooth drifts were thought to signal ongoing wind. Jagged piles suggested shifting conditions. You peek at the door gap, studying the way snow stacks there. Smooth, packed, predictable. If that belief holds, nothing is changing soon. Joke number 3, soft and resigned. The universe has left you on loading and forgotten to show a progress bar. You accept that. Acceptance doesn't mean giving up. It means adjusting expectations. You settle deeper into the hay, closer to warmth, maintaining awareness without tension. This is how people survived long winters before electric light and central heat, by syncing themselves to slower rhythms, by trusting patterns older than panic. One cow lets out a long, low moo, not loud enough to startle, just enough to remind you she's there. It's oddly comforting, like a check-in. You murmur something back, nonsense words, tone calm. She doesn't respond, but she doesn't object either. Companionship doesn't always require conversation. As the hours creep forward, you realize something important. The storm has stopped being the main threat. Now the danger is impatience, leaving too soon, burning too much fuel, eating too much food, letting boredom push you into a bad decision. Animals don't do that. They wait. They conserve. They endure. You take the hint. You sit quietly, tending fire and self, watching for small changes. When the cows shift, you notice. When the wind alters its pitch, you note it. You're no longer fighting the storm, you're coexisting with it, learning its moods. That skill, quiet observation, was once common, even necessary. Tonight, it's your edge. And as the barn settles into a shared stillness, animals and human alike, you feel something unexpected beneath the fatigue and cold, a cautious confidence. Not because the storm is kind, but because you're finally listening to the right teachers. The quiet is what makes sleep dangerous. Not the loud, dramatic kind of quiet, but the soft, padded silence that settles in once everything has agreed temporarily to stop changing. The fire burns low and steady. The cows barely move. Even the wind outside sounds tired, like it's pacing itself now. This is the moment your body chooses to betray you. Your eyelids feel heavier than they have all night. Not drooping, sinking. Each blink lasts a fraction longer than the last, and when your eyes close, the darkness feels thick and welcoming, like a blanket you could disappear into. You shake your head once, then again, forcing your eyes open. The effort feels disproportionate, as if staying awake has become a complex task requiring paperwork and approval. People in the 18th century knew this feeling intimately, even if they didn't describe it the way we do now. Mainstream historical fact slips in quietly here. Many period accounts of winter deaths mention victims who sat down to rest and never rose again. Whether this was hypothermia-induced sleep or simple exhaustion is still debated, but the pattern is consistent enough to be terrifyingly familiar. You press your palms together hard, rubbing them until heat and pain bloom. You stand, then immediately regret it as dizziness washes through you. You pause, breathing slowly, letting your balance return. Standing helps. Movement helps. Sitting too long lets the cold creep back in, settling deeper each minute. Historians still argue whether brief, controlled sleep in cold conditions is actually as dangerous as folklore suggests, or whether the real risk lies in losing the ability to wake yourself again. Standing here, swaying slightly, you don't care which theory is correct. You only know that right now, sleep feels less like rest and more like surrender. There's a quirky tidbit worth murmuring into the night. Some winter travelers carried pins or small sharp objects specifically to prick themselves when drowsiness set in, believing pain could ward off deadly sleep. You don't have a pin handy, but the idea makes a certain grim sense. You pinch your arm hard just once. It works. You hiss softly, then exhale, focused again. Joke number 1, dry and exhausted. Nothing says cozy bedtime vibes like deliberately hurting yourself to stay alive. You pace the barn slowly, counting steps. 10 from wall to wall, turn. 10 back, you do it again and again. The cows watch you with mild curiosity, chewing steadily, unimpressed by your midnight exercise routine. Their calm reminds you not to overdo it. Too much movement means sweat, and sweat means cold later. Everything tonight is about balance. You stop near the fire, crouch, and feed it a few small pieces of wood. The flames respond instantly, brightening, throwing warmth outward. You hold your hands out, then your boots rotating carefully. Heat helps, but it also deepens the temptation to sleep. Warmth whispers that things are okay now, that you can rest. You answer that whisper out loud. Not yet. Your voice sounds strange in the stillness, too loud and too human. One cow flicks an ear in response, then settles again. Talking helps. Sound anchors you to the moment. People traveling alone in the 18th century were known to sing, recite prayers, or speak aloud during long, dangerous journeys. Historians still argue whether this was spiritual comfort or practical self-stimulation, but either way, it worked often enough to become habit. You murmur fragments of songs you half remember, words dissolving into rhythm. The content doesn't matter, the cadence does. You match it to your breathing, slow and steady. Your mind stays present, less likely to drift off on its own. Outside, the storm eases another notch. Snow still falls, but now it's almost gentle, a steady descent rather than a barrage. Wind brushes the barn instead of battering it. This change is subtle but meaningful. If conditions continue like this, morning travel might be possible. That thought sharpens you, gives your fatigue something to lean against. Joke number 2, faint but sincere. Hope is a surprisingly effective energy drink. You check yourself again. Fingers move, toes respond. Your nose is numb but not painful. Ears feel thick, dull. You adjust your hat lower, scarf tighter, careful not to trap moisture. These small rituals keep you engaged with your body, remind you that it's still under your care. You sit again but not fully. Half squat, half lean, weight shifting often. You refuse to let yourself get too comfortable. The hay scratches through your clothes, keeping you alert. Comfort, you've decided, is suspicious. There's another old belief that drifts up from the edges of memory. If you dream of warmth in the cold, you're already in danger. Whether that's folklore or observation is unclear, but you take it seriously. When your thoughts start to wander toward fireplaces and summer fields, you pull them back deliberately, focusing on the here and now. The smell of smoke, the sound of chewing, the faint creak of wood. Historians still argue whether people of the past had greater tolerance for discomfort, or whether they simply had fewer alternatives and adapted accordingly. Sitting here, resisting sleep with stubborn awareness, you feel that adaptation happening in real time. Your standards shift. Survival narrows the definition of good enough. Joke number 3, soft and resigned. Your luxury spa experience tonight includes hay exfoliation and insomnia. Minutes blur into something longer. You don't know how long you've been awake, hours maybe, but the quality of the night changes. It feels thinner somehow, as if dawn is pressing faintly against the other side of the darkness. This could be wishful thinking. It could also be real. Either way, it gives you something to hold on to. You stand once more, stretch carefully, and look at the door. Snow still banks against it, but not as aggressively. You can hear less wind now, more stillness. The storm hasn't left, but it's loosening its grip. You return to the fire, tending it gently, conserving fuel. You sit close to the cows again, sharing warmth and quiet vigilance. Together you wait, not sleeping, not moving, just existing with intention. In the 18th century, many nights like this ended without drama, without rescue horns or sudden miracles. People simply endured until morning arrived and the world became navigable again. Tonight, you're doing the same, holding the line against sleep and cold, one slow breath at a time, as the long night finally begins to consider letting you go. Morning threatens to exist, not with light yet, but with possibility. The darkness thins just enough that your thoughts start reaching outward again, past fire and cows, and the tight circle of survival you've been maintaining all night. With that outward reach comes something new to worry about: other people. In the 18th century, storms like this rarely caught only one person. Villages, farms, travelers, all were scattered across the landscape, each dealing with the same weather in different ways. Community could be a lifeline, but it could also fracture under pressure. And you know that if you encounter others today, things won't be as simple as "we're all in this together." You listen carefully. Over the soft crackle of the fire and the occasional shuffle of hooves, there's something else now. A sound that isn't wind. Not close, but not imaginary either. Voices, maybe, or wood knocking against wood. Your heart rate ticks up, alert but cautious. Human sounds are comforting in theory. In practice, they complicate everything. Mainstream historical fact slips in here with quiet weight. Many deaths during 18th century blizzards occurred not in isolation, but during attempts to reach or assist others. Rescue efforts often failed because they pulled multiple people into danger at once, especially when resources were scarce and coordination was poor. You stand, careful and slow, and move toward the barn door. The cows stir slightly, sensing your shift in focus. You ease the door open a few inches. Cold air slides in, sharp but manageable. Visibility has improved again. You can see shapes now, snowbanks, fence posts, the outline of a road maybe 40 feet away. And there, movement. Two figures hunched against the cold, moving cautiously along what might once have been a path. They're bundled in dark coats, hats pulled low. They haven't seen you yet. For a moment, you simply watch, heart thudding. This is where survival math gets social. If you call out, you risk drawing attention you might not want. If they're injured, desperate, or panicked, they could drain your limited resources fast. If you stay silent, you're choosing yourself over them, a decision that sits heavy even in a world where self-preservation is expected. People in the 18th century lived closer together than we often imagine, but scarcity sharpened boundaries. Charity existed, yes, but it had limits. Historians still argue whether communities of the past were more cooperative in crises than modern ones, or whether we romanticize their solidarity while overlooking the conflicts that records politely gloss over. The figures stop. One gesture's pointing toward the barn, you freeze. They've seen something, maybe the structure, maybe movement, maybe smoke from your fire, thin but visible against the gray sky. Your presence is known now, whether you like it or not. You step back inside, heart racing, and quickly assess. Fire, small but visible. Food, barely enough for you. Space, limited, but shelter is shelter. You think about what happens next. In many 18th century accounts, storms exposed fault lines in social order. Hierarchies mattered. Landowners expected priority. Servants waited. Travelers negotiated from the bottom. Even among equals, fear made people sharp-edged. Sharing warmth could mean condemning everyone if supplies ran out. Refusing help could mean lifelong shame or retaliation later. There's a quirky tidbit that surfaces here. Some villages had informal storm rules, unspoken agreements about who sheltered whom during extreme weather. These weren't laws but social expectations, and breaking them could quietly ruin a family's reputation. You have no idea what the rules are here, if there are any. The figures approach the barn slowly, visibly exhausted. One stumbles, catches themselves on a fence post. You can hear them now, breath ragged, boots dragging through snow. They knock not hard, just enough to be heard. You open the door. Two people stand there, faces red and raw with cold, eyes hollowed by fatigue. They look at you, then past you, taking in the cows, the fire, the hay. Relief flashes across their faces so fast it hurts to see. One of them laughs weakly, the sound cracking halfway through. "Thought no one was here," one says, voice rough. You nod, words slow to arrive. You step aside enough to let them in, then hesitate. This is the line. Once crossed, it can't be uncrossed. Joke number one, internal and dry. Congratulations, you've unlocked multiplayer mode with 0 tutorials. They step inside, grateful and careful, closing the door behind them. Warmth hits them immediately, and you watch their shoulders sag in unison. They don't rush the fire. They don't collapse. That's a good sign. They know the rules of cold, too. Introductions are brief, names, origins, fragments of story exchanged between shivers. They were trying to reach a neighboring village, lost the road, followed the fence like you did. Your shared experience builds trust faster than words could. For a moment, it feels almost easy. Then hunger enters the room. One of them glances at your pack, then looks away quickly, embarrassed. The other rubs their hands together, eyes fixed on the fire. You know they haven't eaten much, if at all. You feel the weight of your remaining hardtack like a physical pressure. In the 18th century, sharing food was one of the most loaded acts imaginable. Bread wasn't just sustenance, it was security. Giving some away meant betting that tomorrow would be kinder. Historians still argue whether people shared more readily during crises or became more protective, but records show both behaviors, often within the same community. You make a decision before you can talk yourself out of it. You break a piece of hardtack into smaller portions and offer it. Not everything, enough. Their gratitude is immediate but restrained, the kind that respects boundaries. They eat slowly, deliberately, as if aware that speed might look like greed. You respect that. Trust is built in these tiny gestures. Joke number 2, quiet and wry. Nothing bonds people like chewing the same terrible food in silence. As time passes, cracks appear, not dramatic ones, but small stress fractures. One of them suggests moving on as soon as the light improves, confident they know the way now. The other hesitates, eyeing the storm, the drifts, the barn. You feel pulled between them, each option carrying risk. Group decisions are harder than solo ones. Compromise can save lives or cost them. You talk it through, voices low. You share what you observed overnight, wind changes, animal behavior, the way the snow is settling. They listen, weighing your words. In moments like this, authority comes not from status but from experience. You earned that by staying alive. Eventually, a plan forms. You'll wait a little longer. Let daylight fully arrive. Move together slowly, marking landmarks carefully. If conditions worsen, you'll return. It's cautious, it's imperfect, it's human. Joke number 3, soft and tired. You've formed a committee, and somehow that feels more dangerous than the blizzard. The cows shift as the group settles into a shared rhythm. 3 people now, tending one fire, managing one small shelter. Space feels tighter. Warmth is diluted. But there's also conversation, shared watchfulness, someone else to notice if you start to drift. Community, you realize, isn't automatically safer. It's heavier. It asks more of you, more patience, more generosity, more negotiation. But it also multiplies awareness, spreads the burden of staying alert, and turns survival from a solo act into something shared. Outside, the sky begins to lighten, gray softening toward pale. The storm hasn't ended, but it's no longer dominant. You sit with the others, listening, planning, watching breath fog the air in slow, steady puffs. The blizzard tested your body first. Now it tests your relationships, your values, your willingness to share risk. In the 18th century, this was as much a part of survival as wool and fire. And as you prepare to face the world beyond the barn together, you feel the weight of that truth settle in, quiet, complicated, and unavoidable. The cold doesn't care that you've made friends. It presses in anyway, nosy and persistent, finding new gaps now that more bodies breathe the same air. With 3 of you huddled in the barn, warmth becomes a shared project, and so do injuries. Someone always discovers them once adrenaline fades. One of your companions winces while pulling off a glove. The skin beneath looks pale, waxy at the fingertips. Not black, not blue, yet, but wrong enough to make your stomach tight. Frostnip, maybe edging toward frostbite. In the 18th century, this is where medicine and myth shake hands and hope for the best. You kneel closer to the fire, not too close. Everyone here knows that rapid heat can damage frozen tissue. That's not modern hindsight talking. Even then, people observed that shoving frostbitten hands straight into flame often ended badly. A mainstream historical fact surfaces. Period advice frequently warned against sudden heat for frozen flesh, favoring gradual warming instead. So you do that. Slow. Careful. Hands tucked under armpits, shared body heat doing quiet work. It feels intimate in a way that's practical, not sentimental, survival intimacy. The kind where no one comments because everyone understands. The other companion pulls out a small cloth bundle. Inside, a tin with a smear of something greasy and herbal. Goose fat mixed with pine resin, they explain. A family remedy. Rub it on, keep the skin supple, ward off damage. You nod, because nodding is easier than arguing when nobody has better options. Here's the quirky tidbit. Animal fats were commonly used in cold weather care, not just for cooking but for skin protection. Sailors, farmers, and travelers greased exposed skin to reduce windburn. Some even believed certain fats carried warming properties beyond simple insulation. Historians still argue whether these remedies truly helped or merely gave people a sense of control in conditions where control was scarce. You let the grease be applied. It smells sharp, resinous, faintly like a forest arguing with a kitchen. Joke number 1, internal and gentle. Congratulations, you're now marinating like a very tired dumpling. As you tend the hands, another problem surfaces. Coughing. Dry at first, then deeper. The barn air is warmer but thick, smoky. One companion clears their throat repeatedly, eyes watering. Smoke inhalation isn't dramatic like frostbite, but it's insidious. In the 18th century, respiratory issues from indoor fires were common, especially in makeshift shelters. You adjust the fire, improving airflow, cracking the door just enough to vent smoke without inviting the blizzard back inside. It's a balancing act. Everything is a balancing act now. Someone mentions bloodletting, just casually, like suggesting tea. It's not absurd for the time. Bloodletting remained a mainstream medical practice throughout much of the 18th century, believed to rebalance humors and relieve internal stress. Cold exposure, some thought, caused dangerous internal congestion. Release the blood, release the problem. You hesitate. No one is seriously suggesting it, not yet, but the idea floats there, heavy and awkward. You think of knives, of weakness, of infection. You gently steer the conversation elsewhere, toward rest, warmth, fluids if you can melt more snow safely. Joke number 2, quiet and dry. Nothing says bad day like debating whether to stab yourself for health. Instead, you focus on what you can do. Movement without exertion, stretching stiff joints, rubbing numb toes through layers of wool. You encourage talking, not just for morale, but to keep everyone alert. Silence is seductive in cold. It invites sleep, and sleep invites the cold to negotiate permanent arrangements. The person with the cough shares a folk belief that certain prayers said while warming could call the blood back into the limbs. They murmur a few words now, rhythmic and soft. Whether you believe or not feels irrelevant. The cadence is calming. The body responds to calm. In the 18th century, spiritual and physical remedies often blended seamlessly. Prayer wasn't a last resort, it was part of the toolkit. Faith provided structure when medical knowledge ran thin. Historians still argue whether this reliance improved outcomes through psychological resilience or simply filled gaps with ritual. You watch the frost-nipped fingers slowly regain color. Pink returns, blotchy but promising. Sensation creeps back, bringing pain. Sharp, prickling pain. It's unpleasant, but it's good news. You say so. They laugh weakly through clenched teeth. Joke number 3, whispered. Pain, the worst but most encouraging notification system. Hours pass in this careful tending. The storm outside has softened into steady snowfall, less violent but still relentless. You rotate positions near the fire to keep warmth even. You ration fuel, mindful that smoke means heat but also breathlessness. At one point, the coughing companion shivers uncontrollably. Not from cold exactly, but from exhaustion. Hypothermia doesn't always look dramatic. Sometimes it's just fatigue that deepens into something dangerous. You sit them closer, wrap spare cloth around their shoulders, encourage sips of warmed water. Another mainstream historical fact settles in. Many hypothermia deaths were misattributed in period records to sudden illness or weak constitution, because the mechanisms weren't fully understood. People knew cold killed. They didn't always know how quietly it could do so. You stay alert. All of you do. Community again proves heavier but stronger. One person rests while 2 watch. Then you switch. The rhythm keeps everyone tethered to the present. There's talk of remedies you've heard about, alcohol to warm the blood, for instance. Someone jokes about it, half serious. You gently shut that down. Alcohol gives a false sense of warmth and increases heat loss. Even in the 18th century, some observers noticed that drunk people fared worse in cold exposure, though the science wouldn't be formalized for centuries. Historians still argue whether folk wisdom around alcohol and cold saved lives or cost them, depending on how it was applied. As daylight strengthens, you reassess injuries. No new numbness. Breathing steadier. Color improved. It's not victory, but it's stability. You document everything mentally, the signs, the responses, because memory is your medical textbook now. You realize something subtle has shifted. Earlier, fear drove decisions. Now care does, not comfort care. Attentive, practical, shared. This is how people survived before modern medicine. Observation, restraint, community knowledge passed hand to hand. The barn smells of smoke, animals, resin, and human effort. It's not pleasant, but it's alive. You lean back against a beam, listening to the others breathe, feeling the ache in your own muscles, the dull throb in your toes. You've treated what you can. You've avoided what you fear. And for now, that's enough. Outside, the storm waits. Inside, you hold the fragile line between harm and healing, knowing that in the 18th century, this line was walked every winter by people just like you, tired, improvising, and stubbornly alive. Time loses its edges long before it loses its meaning. You still know it's passing. You feel it in the slow ache of your back, the stiffness creeping into your knees. But hours stop behaving like neat little units. They stretch. They smear. In the 18th century, without watches ticking on every wrist, this kind of time was familiar. Endurance time. The kind measured by breaths, by how often you tend the fire, by whether the light outside looks slightly less gray than before. You check the barn door again. The snowfall continues, steady but lighter now, flakes drifting instead of attacking. That's progress. Not safety, but progress. You note the wind's direction by the way loose hay shifts near the door. Still northerly but weaker. You file that away like a precious scrap of information. Inside, the three of you settle into a rhythm that feels almost monastic. One feeds the fire sparingly. One watches the animals, making sure none go down. Livestock collapsing in cold could mean panic, injury, or worse. You take the third role, watching people. Faces, fingers, breathing, the small signs. This is how endurance actually works. Not heroic charges through snowdrifts, but quiet vigilance. A mainstream historical fact hums in the background. Most people who survived extended cold exposure did so by minimizing movement, conserving calories, and maintaining routine, however small. Endurance favored the boring. Joke number 1, dry and sleepy. Turns out survival is 90% vibes and not messing up. You start marking time mentally by fire cycles. Feed, burn, fade, feed again. Each cycle feels like an accomplishment. Each one means you didn't freeze, didn't panic, didn't do anything dramatically stupid. Someone asks how long you think it's been since the storm began. You shrug. Guessing feels dangerous. It invites impatience. Instead, you say what you know. It's lighter than before. The wind has shifted once. The cows are calmer. These are facts. They ground everyone. There's a quirky tidbit you remember hearing once. Some 18th century farmers claimed cows could sense the end of a storm hours before humans, adjusting their behavior subtly. Modern science would say animals respond to pressure changes and sound frequencies, not prophecy. But the belief persisted because, honestly, it sometimes seemed true. Historians still argue whether reliance on animal behavior genuinely improved survival decisions or simply reinforced confirmation bias in communities that lacked instruments. You glance at the cows now. They're standing, not huddled tightly anymore. One chews lazily. That feels like a good sign. You share the observation. No one challenges it. Hunger becomes a low, constant hum. You ration the remaining hardtack carefully, breaking it into smaller and smaller portions, soaking some in warmed water to make it easier to chew. The others follow your lead. There's no argument. Scarcity has a way of silencing ego. In the 18th century, calorie management was instinctive. People didn't count numbers, but they understood effort versus intake. Heavy labor in cold burned through reserves frighteningly fast. You all move less now. Sit more. Even speech slows. Joke number 2, barely audible. You've entered low power mode. Battery saving enabled. Fatigue presses on your eyelids, heavy and persuasive. This is the most dangerous part, not the cold itself, but the invitation to stop resisting it. You remember stories half heard about people sitting down just for a moment and never standing again. Even then, people knew sleep in extreme cold was treacherous. You set up a system. 2 rest while 1 stays awake. Not standing guard heroically, just awake enough to notice changes. You take the first watch because your mind feels clearer right now, and because leadership in these moments is mostly about volunteering before someone else has to. As the others settle, their breathing slows. You fight your own drowsiness by focusing on details. The crackle of hay in the fire, the soft shift of hooves, the way smoke curls upward and disappears into the dark beams. You narrate quietly in your head like you're telling a story to yourself. It helps. A mainstream historical fact drifts in. Diaries from the 18th century often describe long winter ordeals in meticulous detail, possibly because writing or mental narration helped people stay conscious and oriented. Storytelling as survival tool. Outside, light grows marginally stronger, not bright, just less dim. The sky is a uniform pale gray now, like parchment. Snow still falls, but the flakes are larger, slower. You crack the door again. The cold that enters feels different, still biting but less aggressive. You inhale, testing it. The person with the frost-nipped fingers stirs and asks if it's time. You say not yet, patience. Moving too early could undo everything. This is another endurance lesson. Waiting is an action. Historians still argue whether most fatal decisions in historical storms were driven by panic or by misjudgment under incomplete information. Sitting here, you suspect it's usually both. When your watch ends, you gently wake one companion. You explain what to look for. You don't dramatize it. Calm transfers. You curl up against the hay, not sleeping deeply but resting. Your body thanks you immediately, even as the cold keeps you from drifting too far. Time slides again. When you wake properly, the barn is brighter. You can see the grain of the wood now, the frost tracing patterns along the beams. Snowfall has thinned to a whisper. Wind is minimal. The storm hasn't vanished, but it's loosening its grip. Hope arrives quietly, not with trumpets, but with math. Less wind means less heat loss. Better visibility means navigation might be possible. Animals are alert. People are stable. These are checkboxes, and most of them are ticked. Joke number 3, soft and relieved. You may have survived by doing almost nothing aggressively. You gather the group. You talk through options again. Move now cautiously toward known landmarks, or wait longer, risking dwindling supplies but gaining certainty. No one rushes the decision. The storm taught you all the value of restraint. Endurance isn't glamorous. It doesn't feel like victory. It feels like staying when leaving is tempting, watching when sleeping is seductive, counting breaths when hours won't behave. In the 18th century, this was the quiet core of survival, rarely celebrated but often decisive. You look at the door, at the pale world beyond it, and you feel something unfamiliar but welcome. Readiness. Not confidence, not bravado, just readiness earned through patience. Whatever comes next, you've learned how to wait, and that might be the most important skill the blizzard taught you. Rumors arrive before rescue ever does. They drift in on half-heard sounds, on remembered stories, on the way people lean toward hope even when it's inconvenient. As the light strengthens outside the barn, someone mentions having heard church bells once long ago during a storm like this, proof that a village was near, that help was moving. The idea hangs in the air, fragile but tempting. You listen, really listen. The world beyond the barn is quieter now, but quiet doesn't mean empty. Snow absorbs sound, distorts it, plays tricks. A gust can carry noise miles away or swallow it whole. In the 18th century, without radios or reliable signaling, rescue was mostly rumor until it was. Mainstream historical fact settles in. Organized rescue efforts during blizzards were rare and dangerous. Most rescues happened when survivors reached each other, not when help arrived from afar. Communities lacked centralized emergency response. Decisions were local, improvised, and risky. Someone swears they hear something now. Shout maybe, or a bell, or just wind combing through trees. You pause, heart thumping, and strain your ears. There is something. A low sound, intermittent. It could be anything. Snow sliding off a roof. A fence creaking. Your own pulse. Historians still argue whether historical accounts of hearing rescue sounds were genuine or stress-induced auditory illusions. Cold, fatigue, and hope make the brain generous with interpretations. You don't dismiss it outright. Dismissing hope can be as dangerous as chasing it. Instead, you test. You open the barn door wider, step just outside, and listen again. The cold wraps around you, familiar now. You turn your head slowly, triangulating like you're trying to find a phone ringing in another room. Nothing clear enough to bet your life on. Joke number 1, whispered to yourself. Congrats, you've invented surround sound paranoia. Back inside, you talk it through. If there are people nearby, moving blindly toward sound could still lead you into deeper drifts or off the road. Or aren't you be leaving shelter on a rumor? But staying forever isn't an option either. Supplies won't stretch indefinitely. This is where 18th century survival often hinged, not on strength, but on judgment under uncertainty. Diaries from the period frequently describe agonizing debates about whether to wait or move, with outcomes split almost evenly between triumph and tragedy. You decide on a compromise. A short, careful scouting attempt. One person stays with the animals and fire. Two of you step out, roped together loosely with spare cloth, not for drama but for balance and visibility. You mark the barn door with a strip of cloth so it stands out against the snow. Quirky tidbit: travelers in the 18th century sometimes left deliberate markers, broken branches, cloth scraps, even lines in the snow to guide themselves back, an early form of breadcrumbing. You step into the snow. It's ankle deep in places, thigh deep in others where drifts have settled. Progress is slow, deliberate. You follow the faint suggestion of the road, using fence posts as guides. Every few steps you stop and listen. The sound returns, faint, rhythmic. Not a bell, you realize, more like wood striking wood. Maybe a door in the wind. Maybe someone chopping ice. Or maybe the storm's last illusions, reluctant to let you go. Historians still argue whether people in the past underestimated environmental deception, or whether they simply accepted it as part of the landscape. You advance a little farther, heart pounding. Visibility improves just enough for shapes to sharpen. Trees, a bend in the road, and then there it is, a structure. Low, squat, a shed or outbuilding half buried in snow. No movement, no smoke. You approach cautiously. The sound grows louder. It's a loose shutter banging gently in the weakened wind. Relief and disappointment hit together. No rescue here, just weather playing tricks. Joke number 2, tired and fond. Even the storm is trolling you now. You decide not to push farther. This is far enough to gather information without gambling everything. You turn back, following your own tracks, grateful you marked the barn. The return feels faster, maybe because decision-making is done. You re-enter the shelter and report what you found. No one is crushed. That's the victory. You didn't let hope outrun sense. You adjust the plan. When snowfall stops entirely or visibility improves further, you'll move toward the main road together. For now, you wait. As if on cue, the snow begins to thin. Flakes become sparse, drifting lazily. The sky lightens another shade. You can see farther now, hundreds of feet instead of dozens. The world is reassembling itself. Another mainstream historical fact: many blizzards that devastated 18th century communities ended not with dramatic clear skies but with gradual easing that tempted people out too early. Secondary exposure after the storm claimed many lives. You don't rush. You've learned better. The person who stayed behind reports nothing unusual. The animals are calm. The fire is steady. You all eat a little more, conserving enough energy for what's coming next. Joke number 3, soft and hopeful. Turns out rescue was the friends you didn't chase along the way. Eventually, you gather your things. You pack deliberately, checking layers, tightening wraps, redistributing weight so no one carries too much. Community again proves its value. 3 sets of eyes catch mistakes one might miss alone. You open the barn door fully now. The world beyond is quiet, snow-laden, fragile, beautiful in a way that feels undeserved after everything it put you through. The road is visible again, a pale line through white. No bells, no shouts, just a path. You step out together, not rescued but ready. In the 18th century, this was often the closest thing to salvation, surviving long enough to walk yourself back into the world. And as you take those first careful steps away from the barn, you carry the lesson the storm carved into you. That hope is useful, rumors are dangerous, and patience, somehow, is both the hardest and most effective rescue of all. The world after a blizzard is a liar. It looks calmer than it is, smoother, almost inviting, as if nothing truly dangerous could hide beneath all that white. You know better now. Every step is a negotiation with what you can't see. You move together, slow and deliberate, following the road's faint depression through the snow. The air is still cold, but the wind has softened into something manageable. Your breath no longer feels stolen with each inhale. That alone feels like a gift. Almost immediately, new hazards reveal themselves. Snow bridges, thin crusts stretched over ditches, weight to collapse under weight. Drifts disguise uneven ground. One wrong step could twist an ankle, and in the 18th century, a twisted ankle in winter could be a death sentence. Mainstream historical fact slides in with quiet authority. Post-storm injuries accounted for a significant portion of winter fatalities, as people ventured out too soon and underestimated hidden dangers. You test each step before committing, tapping with a stick, shifting weight gradually. You encourage the others to do the same. It's slow, yes, but slowness is survival now. Joke number 1, muttered and fond. Welcome to extreme winter trust falls, starring your ankles. The road curves, and with it comes the first real decision of the day. A fork. One branch dips downward toward what you think is a river crossing. The other climbs gently toward higher ground and hopefully habitation. The river route might be shorter. It might also be lethal. Frozen rivers were treacherous even in good conditions. Ice thickness varied wildly, especially after storms that dumped insulating snow. In the 18th century, people knew this through experience, not measurement. Many died learning the difference. Historians still argue whether historical communities overused frozen waterways for convenience or avoided them more than records suggest. Survival stories skew toward the lucky. You choose the higher ground. It costs more energy, but it avoids ice. No one argues. Everyone remembers the deceptive calm of the storm's easing. Trust has replaced debate. As you climb, the snow thins slightly, scoured by wind. Grass tips poke through. Fence posts appear more regularly. These are signs, not guarantees, but hints that you're nearing maintained land. Civilization leaves scars, even under snow. A quirky tidbit surfaces as you walk. Some 18th century travelers believed that roads remembered their paths, reappearing faster after snow due to compacted soil and habitual traffic. There's a grain of truth there. Human use does shape landscapes in subtle ways. You pause often, not just for rest, but to listen. Sound travels differently now, sharper, less muffled. Somewhere far off, you think you hear something metallic. Not a bell exactly, but not wind either. You don't chase it. You note it and move on. Joke number 2, gentle and restrained. Hope, you've learned, needs a leash. As the day progresses, fatigue returns, not the crushing exhaustion of the storm, but a deep bone-level weariness. Your muscles protest each step. Your stomach gnaws. You ration movement carefully, resting in short intervals to avoid sweating, which would steal warmth later. In the 18th century, people instinctively practiced what we now call energy management. Sweat in winter was dangerous. So was pride. You keep layers adjusted, venting slightly uphill, sealing again when you stop. Historians still argue how much of this knowledge was formalized versus learned through hard experience passed between generations. Then you see it, smoke. Thin, pale, rising straight into the still air. It's distant but unmistakable. Not a rumor, not an illusion. Smoke means fire, and fire means people. You stop, heart pounding. The others see it too. No one speaks at first. You don't rush. You confirm direction, adjust course slightly to avoid private land or obstacles. Approaching strangers in the 18th century carried risks. Hospitality wasn't guaranteed, especially during scarcity, but smoke is the clearest invitation you'll get. As you draw closer, shapes emerge. A farmhouse. Low, sturdy, snow piled high against its walls. A yard trampled with footprints. Proof of recent activity. Joke number 3, soft and amazed. Wow, NPCs finally loaded. You approach carefully, announcing yourselves from a distance, voices steady and non-threatening. This mattered. Surprise could be mistaken for threat. After disasters, fear sharpened quickly. A door opens. A figure peers out, bundled, cautious. Words are exchanged: where you came from, where you're headed, what you need. Your story is familiar to them. They nod. They've heard similar already. Mainstream historical fact settles in gently. Mutual aid was common after storms, as communities understood that survival was collective over the long winter. Helping now meant being helped later. You're ushered inside, not into luxury, but into warmth. Real warmth. A hearth, the smell of bread. Your knees feel weak with relief. You don't collapse, you've learned restraint, but your body registers safety in a way that's almost overwhelming. They offer food. Simple, hot, precious. You eat slowly, respectfully. You share what little you have in return, not because it's needed, but because reciprocity matters. It cements belonging. Historians still argue whether such hospitality was universal or selective, but enough accounts exist to prove it saved lives. As you sit by the fire, boots steaming gently, you look back through the small window at the white world you crossed. It looks peaceful now, almost innocent. You know better. The blizzard didn't end when the snow stopped. It ended when you made it somewhere safe, with your ankles intact, your judgment sharpened, and your trust earned step by step. Outside, the smoke continues to rise, a signal you once mistook for rumor. Now it's real. And as the warmth seeps back into you, you understand something quietly profound. Survival doesn't climax, it resolves. Not with cheers, but with chairs pulled close to the fire and the simple, unbelievable fact that you're still here. Safety doesn't arrive all at once. It seeps in slowly, like warmth returning to fingers, first uncomfortable, then undeniable. You sit near the hearth, boots off, socks steaming faintly, and only now does your body begin its quiet audit of what it's endured. A deep ache settles everywhere at once, as if every muscle finally feels allowed to complain. The farmhouse is modest but solid. Thick walls, low ceilings meant to trap heat. In the 18th century, homes like this were survival machines disguised as domestic spaces. They weren't built for beauty. They were built to outlast winters exactly like the one you just crossed. Mainstream historical fact: post-storm recovery often happened inside these homes, where people regrouped, redistributed resources, and accounted for who was missing. The storm didn't end at the door. It followed people inside in the form of injuries, shortages, and news. You're given a mug of something hot. Not tea exactly. Some kind of grain infusion. It tastes faintly bitter, but the heat is everything. You sip slowly, careful not to overwhelm your system. Someone nearby warns against drinking too fast. They've seen what happens when people rush recovery. Nausea, fainting, shock. Historians still argue whether gradual rewarming was widely understood or simply discovered repeatedly through painful trial and error. Conversation starts to flow, not chatter accounting. Who came from where? Which roads are passable? Which barns sheltered people overnight? Names are exchanged, then repeated, then written down. This matters. Memory becomes infrastructure when official records lag behind reality. A quirky tidbit surfaces as someone mentions that after major storms, families sometimes kept winter lists. Informal tallies of who survived, who didn't, and who owed help later. Not official documents, but social ones. You realize you're being added to someone's mental list right now. Joke number 1, quiet and weary. Congratulations, you've unlocked side quest NPC status. As your body warms, the pain sharpens, toes throb, knees pulse. Your back feels like it aged a decade overnight. This is the aftermath accounting your nervous system postponed. You shift carefully, testing what moves cleanly and what protests. One of your companions removes a boot and reveals a blistered heel, raw but intact. Another shows fingers still red and tender but alive. No blackening. No numbness. Relief passes through the room without ceremony. In the 18th century, frostbite outcomes weren't always immediate. Tissue could fail days later. Everyone here knows that. They advise rest, observation, patience. Again, patience. Historians still argue how many post-blizzard deaths occurred days after storms due to complications rather than exposure itself. Food arrives, simple stew, mostly root vegetables and grain, with a trace of meat flavoring the broth. Protein was precious. You don't ask how much is left. You eat what's offered and stop before full. Moderation is respect. Joke number 2, barely audible. This is the best thing you've ever tasted, and it's objectively very beige. As evening approaches, the farmhouse fills with more people. Survivors trickle in. Stories overlap. Patterns emerge. The storm hit hardest in low-lying areas. Drifts blocked certain roads entirely. One family lost livestock. Another lost a traveler who never reached shelter. You listen, absorbing the shape of the disaster. This is how communities made sense of events before newspapers caught up. Oral synthesis. Collective memory. A debate breaks out quietly near the fire, whether the storm was unusually severe or simply poorly anticipated. Someone claims winters are getting harsher. Someone else insists they always say that. Someone mentions a particularly brutal blizzard decades ago, worse than this one. Historians still argue whether the 18th century experienced increasing climatic volatility or whether perception exaggerates remembered extremes. You find a place to lie down, wrapped in spare blankets. The surface beneath you is firm but forgiving. As your eyes close, images replay uninvited. White-out wind, the barn door, the loose shutter banging like false hope. You breathe through it. You're safe now. Sleep comes in pieces. You wake briefly to coughing nearby, then to laughter, then to the sound of someone stoking the fire. Each time you reorient, warmth, roof, walls still here. During one waking moment, you realize something unsettling and comforting at once. The storm is already becoming a story. Details blur at the edges. Sharp moments remain. This is how survival integrates itself, not as constant fear, but as narrative. Joke number 3, soft and introspective. Congrats, trauma now available in anecdote form. By morning, the farmhouse is quieter. Some people move on, others stay. Plans are made to check outlying farms, to share news, to redistribute supplies. Recovery has momentum now. You step outside briefly. The sky is clear, painfully blue. Snow sparkles. The world looks reborn. It's offensive, honestly, how pretty it is after everything. You understand now that the aftermath isn't just about tallying losses. It's about deciding what the storm means. Was it bad luck? A warning? A test? In the 18th century, these interpretations mattered. They shaped how people prepared or didn't for the next one. You turn back toward the warmth, the voices, the fragile order reassembling itself. Survival didn't end with escape. It continues here, in care, in memory, in the slow rebuilding of routine. The blizzard stripped life down to essentials. The aftermath asks what you'll do with what's left. And as you step inside again, you carry not triumph, but something steadier. The quiet knowledge that you endured, and that endurance has a weight all its own. By the second night after the storm, quiet feels different. Not the tense quiet of listening for wind shifts or phantom bells, but a settled hush, the kind that lets your shoulders drop without thinking about it. You lie near the hearth again, wrapped in borrowed blankets, and notice how your breathing finally finds an easy rhythm. This is what safety sounds like. You spend the day helping where you can, carrying water, splitting wood with careful, economical swings, listening more than talking. In the 18th century, surviving a disaster often meant immediately becoming part of the recovery effort. Idleness was suspicious. Contribution was currency. Mainstream historical fact. After major storms, communities relied heavily on mutual labor to restore roads, check on isolated households, and bury the dead. Survival was collective long after danger passed. You join a small group heading out to check a nearby outbuilding. Snow crunches underfoot now, solid and reliable. You're cautious, but no longer fearful. Your body remembers the storm, but it no longer obeys it. Inside the outbuilding, you find stored grain intact. Relief ripples through the group. Food security mattered more than comfort. Someone marks the door with chalk, a signal to others that this place has been checked. It's simple, effective, and oddly comforting. A quirky tidbit surfaces. Chalk marks, notches, and symbols were often used informally after disasters to communicate information before centralized coordination existed. You've become part of that quiet system. Historians still argue whether such ad hoc communication networks were widespread or simply better remembered when they worked well. Back at the farmhouse, stories settle into patterns. People repeat the same moments, polishing them unconsciously. The loose shutter, the buried road, the cow that refused to move and somehow saved everyone by forcing them to stop. You recognize how memory selects its heroes. Joke number 1, gentle and self-aware. Somehow the cow's getting a better edit than you. You notice how people look at you differently now. Not with awe, but with recognition. You're someone who made it through. That status carries quiet expectations. You'll be asked for advice next winter. Your judgment will be trusted a little more than before. In the 18th century, survival conferred authority not officially but socially. Experience was proof. You think about what you'll carry forward, not the fear, hopefully, but the habits, slowness, observation, the discipline of waiting. The understanding that community is complicated but essential. Historians still argue whether repeated exposure to hardship made early modern people more resilient or simply more accustomed to suffering. Sitting here, you suspect resilience isn't about tolerance. It's about learning where not to waste energy. As evening deepens, you step outside one last time. The stars are sharp, bright, indifferent. Cold air brushes your face, but it's no longer hostile. You pull your coat tighter, aware now of every seam, every layer, every choice. Joke number 2, soft and satisfied. Look at you, still alive, still slightly overdressed for trauma. You return inside and settle down. The fire crackles low. Conversation fades. Sleep approaches without argument. And now, as the night stretches on and your body finally lets go, the story of the storm loosens its grip. The sharp edges soften. What remains is not terror but texture. The feel of wool soaked then dried, the sound of snow against wood, the strange comfort of sharing silence with strangers who became something else entirely. The blizzard doesn't haunt you. It humbles you. It reminds you how thin the line is between routine and ruin, and how much of survival depends on noticing when that line starts to blur. Your breathing slows. The room is warm. The world outside can wait. The 18th century fades not abruptly but gently, like embers settling into ash. You don't need to stay alert anymore. You did enough. You endured enough. Tonight you're allowed rest. So let the images dim now, the white roads, the barn, the long wait for light. Let them drift into memory where they belong. You're safe. You're warm. And the storm finally is over. The fire sinks lower and the sounds around you stretch farther apart. Thoughts wander more slowly now, looping without urgency, like they're tired too. Your body sinks into the surface beneath you, heavy in the best possible way, as if gravity itself has decided to be kind. You don't replay the danger anymore. You remember the pauses instead, the moments of waiting, of listening, of shared warmth. The way time softened when you stopped fighting it. The way survival turned quiet when panic ran out of things to say. Breath in, breath out, each one deeper than the last. The storm becomes distant, like whether you once read about in a book, something that happened to someone else a long time ago. What stays with you is the calm afterward, the feeling of being held by walls and firelight and human presence. If any tension remains, it loosens now. Shoulders ease, jaw unclenches, even your thoughts stretch out and settle, long and unhurried. You're here, you made it. Nothing is being asked of you anymore, just rest. Let the dark be soft. Let the quiet stay quiet. And let sleep arrive the way safety did, slowly, steadily, and without needing to prove anything at all. Sweet dreams.